On that day, he was enjoying a program when a car suddenly collided and entered into his home. He realized it was his best friend, who is now dead, and this was a planned murder.
Not far from car.
So, he traversed on a journey to avenge this cold-blooded murder of his friend.
What I think is that there are other forces at work here.
Welcome back to Paramount Recapped. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me.
If anything happens to my daughter, I will hunt you down.
The movie kicks off on a cargo ship loaded with a bunch of containers. Two crew members are checking out one container after noticing some weird leak. When they pop open a drum inside, they're horrified. The chemical liquid inside instantly eats away at their faces, killing them on the spot. The captain, getting wind of what happened, wastes no time. He suits up, cleans up the mess, and dumps the bodies of his dead crew into the ocean like it's no big deal.
Take care of it.
Elsewhere,
Always exactly where I said they would be.
we meet Inspector Tyrone, who's enjoying a chill day fishing with his buddy Frank. Meanwhile, a guy named Malcolm and a woman called Valentina just got off a ship. They act super suspicious when a cop asks them to get out of their car. Instead of cooperating, they bolt, which forces Tyrone to ditch his fishing trip, despite Frank just catching a big fish, because his boss calls him back for a new case. On a separate note, a private jet lands smoothly and outsteps a mafia big shot named Johnson. The guy is dripping with confidence as he strides out with his loyal henchman in tow. At the airport, Johnson plays it cool with the immigration officer, claiming he's in France for business. He spins a story about being involved in environmental protection, a cause that sounds noble and all, but clearly, the guy has shady plans lurking behind that polished exterior. The focus shifts to a minister named Leonid, who's prepping to speak at a European Union conference in Odessa about pollution from industrial waste. Later, back at his office, Leonid receives a mysterious package with a cell phone. Not long after, he gets a call from none other than Johnson, who drops a bombshell. He's got dirt on Leonid's shady deals involving business permits in Ukraine. When Leonid checks the evidence, he's visibly shaken. Back to Frank, who's chilling at home watching TV. Out of nowhere, a car comes crashing straight into his house, completely wrecking the peaceful vibe. Chaos breaks loose, and Frank scrambles to call for help. Turns out the guy behind the wheel is Malcolm. As Frank takes a closer look, he remembers a past encounter with Malcolm. At one point, Frank had turned down a job offer from a crime syndicate and suggested they hire Malcolm instead. That decision? Yeah, it's coming back to haunt him big time. Malcolm, barely conscious, begs Frank not to pull him out of the wrecked car. Frank has no clue what that's about. Paramedics show up and whisk Malcolm away. That's when Frank notices a woman, Valentina, sitting in the back seat. She's awake now, but refuses to leave the car. Why? She's got a bomb bracelet strapped to her wrist that'll blow up if she moves too far from the vehicle. Frank, now understanding the danger, rushes to stop the ambulance, but he's too late. Things only get worse when Frank gets ambushed at home and knocked out cold. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a bed, wearing a bomb bracelet of his own. Turns out Johnson is behind all this. The crime boss forces Frank to run an errand, deliver a mysterious package. Johnson doesn't stop there. He also insists that Valentina tag along, threatening to kill her if Frank refuses. The bomb bracelets aren't your regular devices either. They've got a color-coded warning system. If Frank steps more than 25 meters from his car, the bracelet lights up yellow. At 50 meters, it turns orange, and at 75 meters it flashes red, basically signaling game over. With no choice, Frank agrees to the job, but insists on using his own car. As they hit the road, Frank tries to get some answers from Valentina, but she stays annoyingly tight-lipped, making an already tense situation even more nerve-wracking. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a tanker carrying dangerous chemicals is creeping into the harbor. Tyrone, now on the case, shows up at Frank's place to dig into what's been going on. At the same time, Malcolm's wrecked car, now on a tow truck, gets intercepted by two of Johnson's men. They grab a gadget from the car that seems to be critical to their plans. Back to Frank, who's juggling this chaotic mission and trying to figure out what's going on. Valentina, however, is of no help. She just sits there in silence, adding to his frustration. Tyrone manages to uncover the license plate of the car used by the guys who intercepted the tow truck. Turns out, they also swiped the car's GPS system, which could be a key piece of evidence to track down Johnson's operation. On another front, Leonid is backed into a corner. He's being pressured to sign a contract involving not one, but 8 cargo ships connected to Johnson's shady business. The minister feels the heat, but hesitates, unable to finalize the deal right away. The next day in Odessa, during the European Union conference, things start to heat up. The ship's captain reports some hazardous materials to his boss, while Leonid, the minister, puts one of his trusted people in charge of handling the situation. Meanwhile, Inspector Tyrone, following up on his investigation, figures out that a black Mercedes, definitely not Frank's, has been spotted heading toward Germany. As for Frank, he decides to pay a visit to his old buddy Otto to dig up info about the bomb bracelet strapped to his wrist. Unfortunately, Frank's every move is being tracked because of a sneaky device planted in his car. Once Johnson's crew realizes Frank's veered off course, they spring into action, forcing him back to the assigned route. When Frank finally makes it to Otto's workshop, he gets some much-needed intel. Otto explains that the bracelet works using advanced magnetic tech that originally came from the Pentagon. Otto dives into the car, searching for the transmission plate, which might hold clues to Frank's predicament. But, as if things weren't bad enough, Johnson's goons show up out of nowhere, barging into the workshop to stir up trouble. Frank, being the badass he is, doesn't back down. He takes on the attackers with speed and skill, leaving Valentina impressed, and maybe even a little starstruck. But just as Frank starts to feel like he's got the upper hand, a particularly tough and highly skilled enforcer steps into the ring. This guy's no joke, and Frank is pushed to his limits trying to hold his ground. Meanwhile, Otto finally locates the transmission, but there's a big catch. Disconnecting it would trigger the bomb on Frank's wrist. Now it's a game of precision, and Otto has to tread carefully to avoid blowing up his friend. Frank manages to arrive at the designated drop-off point, but instead of praise, Johnson calls him up to chew him out for his little detour. Then, out of nowhere, someone hijacks Frank's car remotely, leaving him stunned. With no time to think, Frank grabs the nearest BMX bike and takes off in hot pursuit. He knows the clock's ticking. If he gets more than 75 meters away from his car, the bomb on his wrist will blow. Pulling off some impressive stunts, Frank manages to catch up to the runaway car and reclaim control. He calls Johnson to let him know he's alive and kicking, much to the crime boss's annoyance. But this time, Frank has a trick up his sleeve. He secretly records the conversation and forwards it to Tyrone, hoping the inspector can use it to figure out who Johnson really is and unravel the web of criminals he's dealing with. While all this is going down, Frank and Valentina stop at a gas station. She heads into a nearby store for a drink, but things take a turn when the same black Mercedes from earlier pulls up. The driver spots Valentina and starts chasing after them, turning the situation into yet another high-stakes pursuit. Frank uses the moment to call Johnson again, trying to piece together more details about who's behind all this and what their endgame is. To shake off the pursuit, Frank shows off some killer driving skills. In one daring move, he weaves his car between 2 parked container trucks with barely any space to spare. Then, he steers the car into the forest, hoping the rough terrain will help him lose the tail. But Johnson's guys aren't giving up that easily. They keep coming, guns blazing, trying to stop Frank's escape at all costs. The tables turn when Frank manages to push their car off a cliff, where it explodes in a fiery mess. Exhausted but relieved, Frank finally has a moment to breathe, and Valentina steps in to comfort him. When Frank finally opens the package he's been carrying, he's surprised to find just a phone book. It dawns on him that the real package Johnson was so keen on is Valentina herself. This realization sparks some playful banter between Frank and Valentina, leading to a moment of unexpected intimacy between the two. On the other side of the story, Johnson calls up Leonid, the minister, to deliver a threatening message. He drops a major revelation. Valentina is actually Leonid's daughter. This explains a lot, including why she was being held hostage. Valentina shares how she ended up in this mess, recounting how she was drugged at a nightclub and taken by someone. That someone turned out to be Malcolm, and the whole car crash at Frank's house was Malcolm's desperate attempt to escape. With the pieces of the puzzle coming together, Leonid realizes how serious things are and agrees to cooperate with Tyrone to save his daughter. Meanwhile, Frank gets new coordinates from Johnson, directing him to a bridge where Johnson and his crew are waiting. When Frank and Valentina arrive, Johnson's men waste no time. They take Valentina, leaving Frank under heavy gunfire. With no other option, Frank drives his car straight off the bridge, but uses some clever tricks to keep himself safe. Johnson, wanting to ensure Leonid signs the contract, hops on a train, leaving his henchmen to deal with the mess. Frank isn't done, though. In a dramatic move, he launches his car onto the train and takes down Johnson's crew one by one. When he finally confronts Johnson, Frank gets crafty. He manages to attach the bomb bracelet to Johnson's wrist instead. Then, making a narrow escape, Frank speeds away as the bomb explodes, taking Johnson out for good. With the danger behind them, Tyrone contacts Leonid to let him know Valentina is safe. Relieved, the minister tears up the contract and heads to the conference to expose the mafia's shady dealings. Meanwhile, the authorities intercept the cargo ship carrying the hazardous materials, putting an end to Johnson's illegal operations. In the aftermath, Frank, Tyrone, and Valentina finally get some downtime. The three of them go fishing, enjoying a rare moment of peace after all the chaos.